she was missing, and we never really got justice for her.
Families in Montreal tell the National Inquiry how they are still affected by not knowing how their loved ones died.
The herds back then was anywhere from 200 to 250. Now it's only maybe half of that.
Wild bison still roam in Athabasca Chipewyan territory in northern Alberta, but drilling for oil could change all that.
For a child that has never grown up north, and they learn something new from their culture.
And what are you doing on your spring break? Youth from the Ottawa area are learning old skills. Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward. The National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Women and Girls is in its third day of hearings in Montreal. Today, the inquiry heard from Inuit members who told their stories of pain and loss. Danielle Rochette reports.
This sound was familiar to the dozens of people gathering today at the inquiry. Sarah Nouriek-Kalak is an Inuit from Inuit Nunavik. She's also a member of the Murdered and Missing Women National Family Advisory Council. Today, she wanted to speak about her beloved older sister, Alassi.
I'm here for my sister, Alassi Nouriek-Kalak. That's the picture of her. My wonderful sister. I loved her a lot. I wanted to be here to speak for her because she was missing, and we never really got justice for her.
Alassi was 34 years old when she disappeared in October 1994 in Montreal. Her body was found 1 month later in the St. Lawrence River.
It was very difficult for us, for we did not know how it is that Alassi died. This was the information I sought for a long time. I thought there was an investigation as to determine how she died. That was my assumption.
According to Sarah and the family, Alassi was never searched for when she was missing, and no investigation had ever been done on her death. Their questions remain without answers for 25 years now. They want the case reopened.
I want to know, just like my parents wanted to know, just like my sisters wanted to know, and my brothers want to know. This had affected us a lot.
For Sarah, even the coroner's report needs more explanations.
It wasn't clear if it was accident or if it was murdered. No, it was just like a question mark.
Tomorrow, the hearings will focus on women victims of violence. Danielle Rochette, APTN National News, Montreal.
Earlier today, Danielle Rochette spoke with Commissioner Michelle Audette about the inquiry's request for an extension. Here's that interview.
Commissioner Audette, can you tell me where things are at with the request, for the extension of the inquiry?
So far, I didn't read anything saying that they did receive. Of course, they do. They did. I saw at APTN, so thank you for you. So I believe that they're making the analysis to see what's feasible for them. And like she said during the interview, she will give us the information within a month. So I hope it's a positive response.
Okay. And in the commissioner letter to Minister Bennett, it said that there are current mandate limitations and that French-speaking Indigenous women and girls were referred to as an argument for an extension. Can you explain that?
Okay. The reason is that we did make an analysis of 98 reports over the past 40 years or 20 years, and none of them were mentioning the reality of Indigenous women who lives in Quebec and who speaks French as the second language, let's say. Even the Amnesty International or even the NWAC research on the database of the missing and murdered Indigenous women and many other research. So it was a strong argument among the four of us to say there is vulnerable groups across Canada, and one of them is here in Quebec, so we need to make sure that they are part of the research. And in order to do that and to do it well, time is crucial.
And my last question will be, do you find the testimonies of the inquiry in Quebec different from the rest of Canada?
Well, I have to say that when we heard the first time the Inuit people, Naskapi and Atikamekw and Maliotenam, we were shocked to hear that when children got sick in the 60s or 50s, they never came back. So we thought it's probably an isolated reality or tragedy, but it seemed like, I don't know if you saw yesterday, many families from the Atikamekw Nation mentioned to us that it happened to them also. They didn't know, but because of the inquiry, they found out that they weren't alone. And one thing also we listen here and receive as their truth, it's how the Indigenous police did or didn't do the investigation. We hear a lot about the RCMP or Sûreté du Québec or other police force, but across Canada so far, it's the first time that I'm receiving truth where it talks about the Indigenous police force.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Merci, Daniel.
Merci.
The Manitoba government announced today there will be no public inquiry into the death of Tina Fontaine. Right after Raymond Cormier was found not guilty in the death of the teen, protest camps were set up across the country. But many were soon taken down, including the one in Calgary. However, this week a new tent was raised outside Calgary's courthouse. The camp became known as a safe gathering place in the city. Garrett Smith, the new camp organizer, says when the original tent came down over a week ago, many people reached out and asked for it to be set up again. With the help of other organizers, Smith reopened Calgary's gathering place.
I've had two gentlemen who actually came into the camp in the first week, and they said that this camp saved their life, actually, that they had thoughts of suicide, and they saw the camp and they came by and they opened up, and it kind of gave them a little bit of hope. So it just really made me realize that this community, our people, you know, not just First Nations, but the non-Native community as well, is actually really crying out for a space like this where you can just engage in a comfortable dialogue.
Wednesday, the Quebec inquiry into relations with Indigenous peoples heard testimony from the province's ombudsman. The ombudsman's 2016 bombshell report into the broken justice system in Inuit territory was the major talking point. Tom Fenario has the story.
Terrible detention conditions, little cultural or language services, thousands of kilometers of travel for a trial that could last well over a year. These were just some of the issues outlined in this Quebec Ombudsman report on justice in Nunavik. 2 years later, representatives from the Ombudsman testified about what progress has been made and what still needs to be done.
Nothing is perfect, but at least the government, Ministère de la Sécurité publique et Ministère de la Justice, moved on certain aspects.
The Ombudsman says more chartered flights have sped up the length of trials, and that increased funding has enabled Inuit to install better support services. But there has been little movement on the issue they consider a priority: the overcrowding of detention centers such as this one in Pervunatuk, where there have been reports of overcrowded cells in unsanitary conditions. Robin Aubu-Frechette says discussions amongst Quebec and Inuit bodies have held up a call for tenders, which means construction of new holding cells is unlikely to begin until 2019 at the earliest.
We understand that there's a certain delay, but they need to act fast.
The Ombudsman also made it clear that they want Inuit and First Nations in Quebec to know they can help. They testified that the complaint that led to the Justice Report didn't come from the Inuit. As a result, they intend to reach out more to Indigenous people in Quebec. They laid out a long-term goal to recruit liaison officers from within every community.
Ça serait notre porte d'entrée pour être en contact avec les Autochtones. Donc, ça faciliterait notre appropriation de la culture de cette communauté, mais du contact avec la partie plaignante, notamment ne serait-ce que sur le plan de la langue.
In April, the Quebec Ombudsman will deliver letters to the province outlining what remains to be addressed to fix the justice system in Nunavik. While they are confident that after 2 years there has been progress, The current state of northern justice leaves much to be desired. Tom Fenario, APTN National News, Montreal.
A First Nation in Alberta is opposed to a proposed oil project they say would be located on their traditional hunting grounds. We'll have the first of a two-part series on that coming up after the break.
Here's a look at Thursday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. Cloudy and +3 in Halifax, Fredericton, and St. John's, where rain is expected. Snow and 2 above for Happy Valley, Goose Bay, and Cartwright. 0 in Saguenay and Quebec City, +1 in Sept-Îles and Montreal. 0 in Sarnia, +1 in London, +2 in Peterborough, 3 above in Toronto. 11 below in Timmins and Kapuskasing, -6 in Sioux Lookout. In Manitoba, -12 in Churchill, -5 in Island Lake. 3 below in Barons River, Gimli Harbor, and Brandon. In Saskatchewan, 2 below in Estevan, Regina, Saskatoon, and North Battleford.
Welcome back. Members of the Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation in northern Alberta are opposing an oil expansion project that would be located in their hunting grounds. They say the massive project will threaten a herd of wild bison. In the first of a two-part series, APTN's Chris Stewart examines the issue, and a warning there are some graphic images in the story.
Theo!
Lisa Tazazi and her family are headed out to Poplar Point near Fort Chipewyan. We join them as they head to the bush to try to locate the buffalo that live here. The buffalo's numbers have been decimated in recent years by foreign hunters.
It was hunter gaming outfits that bring in these high-paid international hunters to go and put their trophy on their walls. So that's unfortunate that we have to have that when our nation is just using them for sustenance. We're just trying to eat and feed our families.
Our group met up with elder and scout Roy Ladisser. He's been living off the land for half a century. Ladisser has witnessed the decline of the buffalo's numbers.
The herds back then was anywhere from 200 to 250. Now it's only maybe half of that. 75 last recorded last year. That could have been to 100, but now they're scattered everywhere. Part of the buffalo.
Roy shows some photos from 2015 when he came across a buffalo carcass. A hunter had decapitated it, leaving all the meat to rot. In 2016, the Alberta government made it illegal to hunt wild buffalo in the area. Roy says he keeps an eye on everyone who comes by. Now, the buffalo are being threatened again, this time by oil. Teck is Canada's largest mining company. They want to open a large open-pit oil extraction site on what Fort Chipewyan members say is right on the buffalo's roaming area.
Teck is a very large project. It's 300 square kilometers. It's in the heartland of our area we call the Poplar Point homeland area. It's 16 kilometers from our reserve.
Tazazi says if the development called the Frontier Project goes ahead, all the varied species living in the area will be threatened.
I asked Teck what will happen, and they said they will disperse elsewhere. And I said, well, where will they go? They will probably go north into the park or the Birch Mountains. And I said, well, how long will they have to be away? And they said, probably 100 years.
Our first day, we head off in search of a buffalo herd. After a couple of hours, we find some tracks in the deep snow, fairly fresh.
They're still using the area, yeah. We know they are. I wish there was more of them, though. Usually the wolves come out and protect them. Protect the bigger herd.
We head back to camp before dark. Roy Ladisser is not only concerned about the wildlife, he uses the Athabasca River to haul supplies and to be a guide. He says the water levels on the river are already dangerously low from current oil sands projects.
The most important thing is the protection of the water. It's bad enough how much water is already damaged and polluted. As from the south, on the Athabasca River Basin, So Lake Athabasca, all the tributaries done run north now, everywhere. But this is the only place that hasn't been touched yet. And this is going to be the last place now.
In part 2 of this story, we will continue our search for the buffalo. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Poplar Point, Alberta.
St. Anne's residential school survivors were back in Ontario Superior Court today. They're arguing the federal government breached its legal obligation when it withheld evidence of abuse and torture at St. Anne's. David Moses reports.
Survivors of St. Anne's Residential School are wondering if they'll ever see justice and reconciliation from the federal government.
We have been doing this since 1992. And our story of abuse as children from the caretakers of the St. Anne's Residential School was the way it was then and continues to be the same. So we haven't changed the way we talk about it.
NDP MP Charlie Angus doesn't mix words about his thoughts on the situation.
We have seen a government that has used their lawyers to suppress evidence, to use all manner of legal tactics to blockade the most basic rights of justice for survivors. And it has been the survivors of St. Anne's who have stood up time and time and time again and said that if reconciliation is going to be real in this country, it has to be made real with the survivors of St. Anne's Residential School.
Regional Chief Isidore Day says this is ground zero.
And I actually look at this as a ground zero initiative. And, you know, if we are to address reconciliation, the residential school survivors' issues and their claims of abuse, that's ground zero. And if Canada refuses to address even just one claim, that's certainly an indication that they're not prepared to do reconciliation full effect. And I think that's a tragedy.
Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler is hoping the government will reach out.
For Edmund and Angela and others that are here, it doesn't feel like that. That there's any hope for them. They've been stymied by the court at every turn. And as I said earlier, that the government, if they're serious about healing the relationship between the government and the Indigenous people of this country, they can always reach out. They can always reach out to Edmund or to the leadership.
But for now, ground zero is back in the hands of the court. David Moses, APTN National News, Toronto.
From the Crown making the decision not to appeal in the Gerald Stanley trial to talks of what is going on with the Thunder Bay Police and the idea of a possible extension into the murdered and missing inquiry. We discussed all these topics live today on In Focus. Here's some of the highlights of the show.
The system has not particularly done well by Indigenous people, and I'm not saying they shouldn't start a lawsuit, but expecting to right this wrong through a lawsuit, I think is a pretty high expectation, and I fear people would be disappointed. I'm not saying they shouldn't do it. There are certainly grounds to do it. I mean, the defense ran at trial this notion of the delay between the pulling of the trigger and the bullet coming out. All of these issues tell us all something, that the defense was quite desperate. It worked, but what it tells you also is that there's serious liability issues, as in negligence in the use of that gun. Thunder Bay Police Board may not actually be exercising its public mandate appropriately. We had one of the pictures we had running at the press conference on March 5th, just a little over a week ago, was this headline and the statement by the Thunder Bay Police Services Board following the charging of the chief that it was business as usual for policing in Thunder Bay. And I think nothing is more profoundly accurate or ironic than that line. It's business as usual.
I think they should just focus on the mandate of the 2 years and finish there. Therefore, they continuously re-victimize families, survivors across this country, and just leave them and go on to the next community and re-victimize even more.
You'll be able to find that whole episode on our website soon. It's spring break for many kids, and that means hanging out with friends and maybe playing video games. But for one group, it means learning old skills. That story is coming up.
Here's the rest of Thursday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta, +4 and high level in Peace River. Snow and +3 in Calgary and Lethbridge. 3 above, minus the snow in Medicine Hat. Over on the west coast, plenty of sun, 10 above in Victoria, Tofino and Bella Coola. +6 in Dease Lake, Prince George, Smithers and Fort St. John. In Yukon, +6 in Watson Lake, Whitehorse and Dawson City. Over to NWT, 7 above in Fort Liard, +2 under the sun in Fort Resolution. 21 below in Sax Harbor, snow and -4 in Tuktoyaktuk. Over to Nunavut, -35 in Cambridge Bay, -26 in Repulse Bay, -37 on Thursday in Tallyoak and Joe Haven.
Welcome back. For many kids, this week is spring break. While some are enjoying sports activities or hanging out at home, there's a group of Inuit kids who are making a connection with tradition. Annette Francis takes us now to a kids' camp an hour and a half west of Ottawa.
13-year-old Gregory Langale is enjoying his spring break. He's spending it amongst old and new friends while learning old skills.
I've learned how to tend a kuluk.
What is a kuluk?
It's a stone lamp that's very traditional, and it was our source of heat in the igloos.
Is there anything else you're looking forward to learning over the week?
I'm really excited to build quinzies or igloos.
Langale is one of 29 Inuit kids from the Ottawa region who have the opportunity to participate in this cultural camp, learning with their elders. It's the third year that the Ottawa Inuit Children's Centre has organized a 5-day event. It's a busy but fun time, says the youth manager, Linda Booth. There's a good mix of activities, like learning the technique of sewing with sealskin, drum dancing, and speaking the language.
We have a couple kids who their first language is Inuit, and for them, they haven't been speaking it and all this week. Their first in talking with the elders is speaking in Inuit. So again, for me, that's really incredible that our language is surviving and continuing, and it's opportunities like this that the kids have to hear the language if they're not speaking it already.
Elder Saituki Jomi has come to share his wisdom every year at this camp. He says what the kids learn here stays with them.
Those of us who have grown up out camping and hunting, we know what we're trying to convey. And for a child that has never grown up north and they learn something new from their culture, you see it in their eyes being Inuk. We teach them who they are.
For these young girls, that's what keeps them coming back.
It's fun, and we get to meet new people. Last year I had a blast with my friends and learning new things about our culture.
Other activities throughout the week includes throat singing, ice fishing, a talent show, and igloo building. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Ottawa.
That is a much better way to spend your spring break rather than playing video games. That's your APTN National News for this Wednesday. I'm Dennis Ward. Have a great night.